Now, Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk have started a major debate by saying we should get rid of intellectual property laws. The duo do argue that in today's AI-driven world, sharing data freely could help innovation move faster. At the same time, critics disagree. They say removing IP protections would hurt creators and make it harder for people to earn a living from their work. And this does come as companies like OpenAI face lawsuits for using copyrighted material to train AI. The big question now, how do we balance open access to information with fair protection for creators? Well, joining me this morning here at the New York Stock Exchange is Richard Gearhart, founder and managing partner of Gearhart Law. Richard, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, Remy, it's a pleasure to be here. So, yeah, Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk have been trading social media messages, and they said, Jack said we should delete all intellectual property law, and Elon Musk said, I agree. So, of course, Elon Musk has his finger on the trigger, right? And so when Elon Musk makes a statement like that, this is something I think that we really need to pay attention to. And of course, as an intellectual property lawyer, I have a lot of hesitation about deleting intellectual property law, because if we do that, we're going to be going from innovation to smokestacks. I think a lot of capital in the markets would be moving from innovation-based companies like biotech, tech startups, and media companies, and then moving to more traditional asset-based companies like real estate, healthcare, big box stores, and retailers. So I think if these changes were to occur, there would be a lot of turmoil in the markets, right? And already the markets are facing so much turmoil now. I don't see how these statements really help. Now, there could be an argument that loosening copyright protections could result in more innovation on the AI space. But if they're not just talking about copyright protections, they're talking about patents.
Absolutely.
And trademarks. And so it's very broadly presented, and I think that that could be a real challenge for industry going forward.
Yeah, especially for the tech industry. And it's really interesting if we take a step back. A lot of these debates, these arguments seem to be taking place on social media nowadays. And when it comes to intellectual property, you mentioned patents. And when we're thinking about the tech space, patents are key. And we know that Dorsey and Musk, right, they rely on their patents. So how realistic do you think this is?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I really wonder sometimes if our billionaires really think through their sound bites, right? Because they go and incite controversy by making these statements, and it really doesn't seem like they've thought through them. And they certainly haven't provided any alternative to foster and nurture innovation. So I do kind of wish they would be more careful when they say things like that. Tesla, for example, has 60 trademarks. And you could hardly imagine Elon Musk approving of me starting a company making Tesla floor mats, right? This is something that they would not like at all. And while Elon Musk's, his opinion on intellectual property seems a little cagey, he also relied a lot on government subsidies in order to build his company. And just as another example, Twitter, for example, they have over 2,000 patents, right? And most of those patents they acquired. So they rewarded innovators by paying them for their patents and their technology. And certainly they wouldn't have done that unless they thought that there was a real value in pursuing those patents. So I do think you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. But it does seem like the Trump administration sort of has a strategy of overstating issues and then walking it back, right? And negotiating some sort of deal. So you really have to wonder if there is something really in the works here that they're considering. OpenAI, for example, and Google have both presented positions to the White House about loosening copyright regulations to help AI improve. And I think that this may be part of that discussion. So.
And Richard, you brought up OpenAI, so I do want to ask you about what we're seeing in that space. But when we think about these billionaires, whether we're talking about Dorsey or Musk, we know that some of the industries that they're dipping their fingers into are also national security based as well. So it really makes you wonder how serious they are. But when it comes to OpenAI, that technology, when it comes to the guardrails, what do you think needs to be implemented here?
I think that if you're going to loosen restraints on copyrights for purposes of AI, that you need to reward the creators somehow. So you're going to have a different system. Maybe rely on blockchain technologies to do that. I mean, it doesn't have to be copyright, but you do have to reward the innovators. AI is a data-driven platform. And so if people aren't creating and putting new data into the system, then the AI is going to eventually grow stagnant. And that's my belief. And I think that that's something that we really need to pay a lot of attention to.
And finally, before I let you go, are there any historical or international examples of countries actually loosening IP laws?
Well, I think that over time, the strength of intellectual property laws globally changes with the governments. But in general, the intellectual property law reflects the country's opinion about private ownership and private capital. So the United States has a very strong tradition of individualism, private ownership. They have the strongest intellectual property system in the world. Countries like China that have weak intellectual property protections, they have very weak intellectual property laws because they believe that ideas belong to the community. So to the extent that we weaken intellectual property laws, we also, I think, weaken innovation, and it's kind of counter to the American idea of rugged individualism.
Okay, Richard, well, thank you so much for joining me here at the New York Stock Exchange and for weighing in on this story that I'm sure we'll continue to keep an eye on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.